I'm Steve Gilman, and this is Brand Story, where we help you build stronger, more sustainable brands by sharing insightful conversations with brand leaders, marketers, and professional storytellers. My guest today is Ross Martin.
I'm moving from the idea of just making better marketing to making marketing better by evolving the systems themselves and making them more fair and equitable, more diverse, more creative, more inspiring.
Ross is the president and co-founder of Known, one of the top agencies in the world, and a truly modern marketing organization. Known uses science, technology, and creativity to help brands like Amazon, Netflix, Meta, and Shake Shack, to name a few. Ross's roots in entertainment run really deep. He spent 13 years in Paramount and leadership and creative. He was also the chairman of the Viacom Marketing Council, where he led global marketing priorities for Comedy Central, South Park, The Daily Show, Nickelodeon, and more. He's an accomplished executive producer of programs for Netflix and MTV and other networks. Hi, Ross. Welcome to Brand Story, man. When do you sleep? It's my main question.
I sleep right after I listen to your new episodes of the podcast because it makes me think so much that I just get exhausted after you. Because, yeah, when do you sleep? You're constantly making new shows.
Yeah, we're really dedicated to we've got guests lined up, and we're going to be going into our 5th season here soon, and I love it.
It's awesome. I'm honored to be one of your guests. I'm a frequent listener, and it's great to be on.
Man, that makes my day. I'm so glad you're listening in. Yeah, I was thrilled to get you as a guest, so this is going to be a blast today. So you've had such an amazing career, and you're a poet on top of everything else, and that just blows my mind. So you've taught poetry, you have been in anthologies, you have your own book called The Cop Who Rides Alone. So that's just amazing to me that you've accomplished so much in media. You're a data nerd and you're a poet. So can you make any sense of that for me?
I think I don't get to talk about poetry very much.
Yeah, I bet.
And so I appreciate you bringing it up. I think I come from a world of art and creativity, and that started with music for me. I'm a drummer. I've played the drums since I was 7 years old. And there's a real connection between, percussion and rhythm and poetry or spoken word and music, right? So you find the rhythm in the day, you find the rhythm in ideas and in people. And I don't know how in the world, I think, to be honest with you, Steve, the way I got into poetry was, I was given a choice. You could write a really long essay for an assignment in 6th grade, or you could write a couple of poems. And it just seemed easier to write the poems.
Always go for the haiku assignment, right?
Exactly. And they my teachers were like, wow, you're actually good at it. And I fell in love with language. And as I got older, I fell in love with using language in unconventional ways and sort of breaking the rules of grammar in the right places at the right time in the right way, so that you sort of create a feeling or an emotion or change someone's opinion about something. And I have carried that through my whole career. I think I'm best known in our industry for using the tools and the platforms in ways that maybe they weren't originally designed to be used.
Yeah, a ton of innovation. I mean, you've led so much innovation in our industry. And I think that background in music and poetry and the way you approach creative, a lot of my favorite creatives all have music backgrounds, or at least either play an instrument or in love with one. I go to music festivals way too much, and it doesn't matter what kind. I'm going to an electronic music festival here next week, in the next couple of weeks. I can't stop. Like, there's something about music that I just have to have more of it, of all different styles.
Do you play an instrument?
Yeah, I play guitar.
Yeah, I thought that. Okay,
and I've played guitar since I was, 14 or 15.
You look like a guitarist.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I play guitar. I had a theater background. I was a theater director. And then, of course, all that through all the, happenstance, I end up in, of course, in marketing and storytelling, right? Just like you. So Known fascinates me because it is one of my favorite agencies. I love your all's work. It is just world-class and it's so original. But you guys do some things that other companies just don't do. Like the way you use data, the way that you approach marketing. So I was reading a little bit about your Big Lebowski tool, which, well named, sir, but also like how you used it for Shake Shack and like combing through subreddits for mentions. And can you just unpack a little of that for me? Because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I should say that, like, the only thing more fun for our data science and engineering team than inventing some new use of technology is naming it, right? So they sit there and you watch these men and women, many of them are PhDs, and like they're like, okay, cool. Like we invented this thing and no one's ever done it like this before. And I'm like, that's dope, right? It used to be that it was only creatives that would run into my office to say, I have a new idea for how we can do something. Now it's literally PhD data scientists and engineers who run in and go, we can now do this. And as soon as they move from really conveying the thought and the capability that we now have, which by the way seems like it happens every day here and at other agencies too, then they move directly into the naming of it. And they're like, well, what should we call it?
I love that.
Yeah, and it's like the most fun. So the Big Lebowski is like one of the all-time faves. It's certainly not the only one. There's other great names. In fact, like our technology platform itself is called Skeptic. Skeptic has won a lot of awards. It gets a lot of attention, and for us, it creates a competitive advantage for our teams and our clients. But it's called Skeptic because it never believes it's good enough, right? It's like getting a PhD, and then you're like, well, what comes after that? And you're like, I think that's good enough, right? Well, not Skeptic. So Skeptic just believes that it can always do better. It can always be more effective and efficient, and that really is one of the core values that we live by here at Known. That there's always a better way, and we can never stop learning. And so if you combine those two things, you get this like persistent optimization, and you get this relentless drive to invent shit that nobody's ever tried before, you know? And so the Big Lebowski itself, which is part of the Skeptic platform, is a chatbot and it's an AI tool that can do things that human beings just are not capable of doing. And in the Shake Shack example is a great one, and there are many more to come. But in that, what we were doing with Shake Shack is something that a human being just couldn't do that math fast enough at that scale.
Right.
And what we were doing was scouring all of Reddit, and Reddit's ginormous, as you can imagine, to try to find the right, most appropriate, relevant places to insert a brand message, right? So it's not like you would walk up to random people on the street and start telling them about how good the Shake Shack chicken sandwiches are and how they don't have antibiotics and they're available on Sundays. Like you just wouldn't walk up to strangers and say that in person, just like you wouldn't on the internet, right? You got to find the right time, the right place, the right people where they might be persuadable. And Skeptic, and specifically Big Lebowski, is really, really good at that. And it can scour, in this case, all of Reddit, look for the right people in the right rooms and the right conversations and go like, oh, okay, this is a brand that wants to add value to that conversation in an organic way, in an authentic way. And it doesn't feel like it's intruding and it doesn't feel like it's annoying because that would do damage to the brand of Shake Shack. But instead, it's offering something to the conversation that we and AI believe might be appropriate and valuable.
Man, that is like the definition of modern marketing. Instead of interrupting, shouting, telling you a message when you're the least welcome to it, you're finding people who already have, an interest or a passion for food, or they're just talking about it, or their lifestyle supports it, and then you're interjecting. That's amazing.
Can you imagine if you think about how many times you've been hit with the same ad if you're watching a basketball game and you're like, I mean, it's 2024, guys, right? Like, not only is that just incredibly wasteful, and we can talk about waste and how much waste we have found over the last year, which is just insane. I would love to talk about that, but also how much you're not building brand love, you're building brand animosity, you're building hate, right? Like, don't talk to me anymore, cell phone company that I either am
Yeah.
never going to switch to, or even worse, I switched to you last month and now you're hitting me with a better offer and over and over and over again. I'm like, please, you've already conquested me. Don't keep advertising at me with a better offer than the one I got last week or last month, right?
Yeah. It's amazing the fine line between like brand love and brand hate, you know?
And it's amazing that in 2024, we're
Yeah.
still even talking about that. Like,
Yeah. It's insane. And some people aren't even talking about it, obviously, because you see it everywhere. I mean, just, not to get into this topic, but I was watching the debate the other night, like 80 million other Americans. And I swear to God, I watched the promo for the Joker movie 70 times. I thought I was going to jump out a window. Man, it is like an epidemic, especially in broadcast, but also in digital. You see the same messages offered over and over and over again with a level of aggression sometimes that I don't think is doing the brand any good. So that brings you back to like waste, right?
It does, and like I think that sometimes we look at this stuff and we can sort of speak in hypotheticals, right? Or we can talk about, philosophically, is that a good or a bad thing for the advertising industry? F that for a second. Like, this is a question about, is that a victimless crime, right? If you keep hitting Steve Gilman with the same ad over and over so much that he moves from being interested in something to hating it and never wanting to hear from them again, is that a victimless crime? Well, first of all, I'd say we just wasted a lot of your time, Steve, right? And you're paying for that service to be delivered to your home or your phone, and you're now interrupted and annoyed over and over again. So that's one. The other is the CMO, the shareholders. You're actually just destroying your own value spot by spot by spot. And some agency is letting you do that to yourself. Why? Because they make money regardless. It doesn't really matter to them. So as long as you spend more as a CMO, I'm good. I'm happy. Keep spending more. And I'm never going to tell you to stop. And that's where we are as an industry in many cases.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable, Like it's like being the guy at the party that won't stop talking about himself, on an epic scale. Like no one ultimately is going to seek you out and want to spend time with you. One of the things that means most to me in life is hospitality. I had Will Guidara on my podcast. I grew up, basically put myself through school working in like fine dining. And I always come back to that, like good brand marketing is great hospitality. If you're not going to see who you're advertising to and offer them something that might please them, then shut up. Like it's got to be, it's taking care of people. It's trying to entertain or please or.
Well, I think I'll go back to something you yourself said on a previous episode of the podcast, which is all about not just the opportunity, but the obligation that we as marketers have to learn as much as we can about consumers and understand them at the deepest level. So that even if we can't anticipate or predict what they might want, and by the way, we're really getting good at that, we can at least respond to the overwhelming amount of information we have through their actions and their words about what they like and don't like, right? So if you're working at a fine dining institution, I only worked at Bertucci's, if anyone even knows what that is.
Yeah, I do actually.
But, it's like, I know if you've come in with your friends or your family for the last 7 weeks on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like when you get, 3 weeks into that, I'm kind of like, I know they like extra bread.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them extra bread. Why? Because I want them to be happy and I want them to give me a tip. And the way to do that is to give them what they want and maybe even do it before they ask, because now they feel like seen and understood, right? And so what technology has taught us is what I call the anxiety of inference, meaning I expect now for my phone to know that every day I essentially do the same 5 things at basically the same 5 times. And my phone's getting damn good at it. Like it knows to tell me if it's going to be raining. Like it knows to ask me if I want Starbucks at 3 p.m. And it knows where I'm probably going to be at 6 p.m. and how to anticipate being of service to me. And that's my phone. Okay. But and that's where the consumer expectation is now being set for all categories. So when I get in my car and it doesn't know after 30 days of going to Starbucks at 7:45 in the morning that I'm probably going to Starbucks, why? You know how much money we pay for our car to be that dumb? Like, I'm going to Starbucks. Tell me if there's an accident on the route I usually take, tell me. Also, tell Starbucks I'm coming. Because, why do I have to do that over and over again?
And even help me further and give me a hand or making my order or do something else. It's all that value add.
Yeah, eliminate. Yeah, so it's like this is where we get to sort of like the expectations that are being set in every category. and they're being set by the best experience that you've had in one category that you now port to all the others, right? So when we were working with General Motors earlier in my career, what we said is stop comparing yourself to the car company on your left and right. Start comparing yourselves to the best experiences that consumers are having in other categories. That's how you're going to stand out, right? And it seems obvious now.
That's one of my favorite things I think I've had someone say on this podcast because it doesn't get said enough. Like, stop comparing yourself to the other bank or the other healthcare institution or the other cell phone provider, because you're right. The expectation gets set by the leading whatever it is. Whatever our best experience is, we are going to extrapolate that to all of our other experiences. Period. That's how we are. Like once we get it, we want more of it.
Nobody's like, well, I have a different level of expectation of my car than I do of my, I don't know, computer. How many more tens of thousands of dollars did I pay for my car? Am I paying for my car to be stupider than the computer? No.
You're just forced to because, and then that creates dissatisfaction.
What still boggles my mind, and there are some new car companies that are in stealth mode, one of whom we're about to start working with, that have figured this out. Like even just the customization part of it, right? So it's like, you know, like the worst day of owning a pair of Converse is the first day, right? Because you just get a pair of, let's say, white Converse, and they look too new, and they're just too perfect. They got no story to tell. And on day one, you start writing that story when you wear those sneakers, right? And they're your sneakers, and you break them in, and they start to look and feel like the shit you do all day. And you might draw on them, you might color them, you might scuff them up, you might whatever, but they're your Converse, and they've got a story to tell. And I feel like Converse figured that out really early. A lot of other brands have caught up and learned from that in other categories. And that's like super cool. And it's happening because Converse understands the belief system of Converse. Whereas like in other categories, we look at brands that have no idea what the belief system might be behind their brand. They know their operating systems, but the belief system is sort of something they've never focused on.
And that's, I think it's kind of a form of arrogance. There's a lot of brands that even though if they say they're about the customer, they're truly just about themselves. And it's the brands that are actually showing up for the customer, sort of my hospitality, issues that I have. But like the brands that are really very interested in solving a problem, making someone more satisfied, are the brands that people forgive when they make mistakes. They're the brands that people will show up for and do things like become fans of. Like, Converse is going to have an awful lot of latitude with what they do because people love Converse. That's why we love brands. It's the ones that do something to please us and then do it consistently and meet our expectations. And then there's a ton of other brands that really, they say they're doing it, but it's about them. And it's about them giving you what they think you want and the end. And there's no thought of it beyond that.
100%. I don't even know what to add to that because you're 100% right.
It's kind of maddening, but it's, hey, all we can do is celebrate the brands that are doing it right. And you work with an awful lot of them. So thank you for the work you're doing with these brands. I want to segue to something because I find it so fascinating. And it's such a cool part of Known, and it's the Known Originals. And that started way, way back in your career because you've been producing media and telling stories for a very long time. But it's like the ultimate content marketing, and talk about adding value. The one that you did for the Countdown Inspirational Mission to Space that also raised like, what was it, $250 million for St. Jude's?
Yeah.
Now that's content marketing.
Yeah.
And on such an incredible scale because it's like lifting so many different people up and helping. Can you just kind of unpack how that project came about, or at least just the philosophy behind your Known Originals? Because it's a fascinating thing you guys are doing.
Thank you. And your timing is impeccable because just 10 hours ago, that client, Jared Isaacman, became the first civilian to attempt and achieve a spacewalk.
Wow.
He actually exited the spacecraft, the Dragon, the SpaceX rocket, and went out into outer space in a spacesuit that he was wearing for the first time anyone was wearing it in space. It's a new spacesuit. After flying higher than any human has flown since the 1970s with his crew of four. And that was the second mission. We created the first mission and told its story, which has now prepared Jared and team for the mission they're on right now in outer space, and the next two after it, which is our attempt to get to Mars. And no one's ever done that, obviously. So the goals are pretty ambitious there. And I'll back up a second, talk about Known Originals, which is run by my colleague Brad Roth, and it's very consistent with how Known believes it should be of service to the clients that we work for. Um, I think that when you come to Known with the expectation of being known for something, right? If your brand um, wants to be known and loved in the world, the question is really, how do we do that? The first answer is knowing oneself, and you and I just talked about that. So what is our brand? Who are we? What do we stand for? If we didn't exist, what would the world be like? All that stuff. And we call that belief system work. The second would be, who do we want to know us, right? So as you talk about often on the podcast, um, what kind of consumer intelligence can we leverage to understand the people that we should be trying to talk to and engage and eventually convert? And what are the people we shouldn't even bother talking to, because they're definitely not going to be interested at all, or they might hate us. So how do we identify the people we want to persuade? And then the third is, what do we want to be known for? And that's where you talk about, let's say, marketing and advertising campaigns. And the question of how those manifest in the world has been has become much more dimensionalized, right? Because there are so many tools and so many more platforms at our disposal that we can tell stories in ways that human beings have never been able to before. And yes, that might be a Super Bowl commercial, which we do a lot of. It also might be a terrestrial radio ad or some out of home experience that you weren't expecting. It could also be that we're changing the uniforms on the salespeople who come to your door, right? So we think about all of those platforms and all of those brand touch points with our clients. And it just so happened that over the last few years, it has been really clear that long form and serial programming, original programming, is a more and more meaningful tool to introduce brands and create brand engagement and ultimately brand love. And that's why Known Originals came to be, because we were doing this, it was working, and we decided to invest in that set of capabilities, right? There are other areas of Known, for example, we're about to announce soon, experiential, right? Where more and more we're bringing brands to life IRL and seeing enormous impact with greater predictability and greater precision and efficiency than ever before with experiential. But back to Known Originals, you know, when we started to do this, one of the first projects was Hulu's first after show. It was a companion to The Handmaid's Tale, and it was called One Burning Question, and it won lots of awards. It was phenomenal for us and for Hulu, and they still do it. And we were like, oh shit, we can actually really do this here at Known, and we have all of the production and post production capabilities, and our writing team's amazing, and like, let's go. And then we started doing it in the documentary space. And most people don't know this, but we also developed and produced the Genius trilogy about Kanye before Kanye was canceled, I should say.
Yeah.
And
Well, huge fan of that series, by the way.
thank you.
Absolute
So
beautiful
Known's
work.
name is not on. Known's name is not on that for lots of reasons, because I think
Yeah,
we were a
makes
little bit
sense.
like, I don't know how that's going to go. But I'm personally really proud that we did it, and we learned a hell of a lot. And right after that, or actually in the middle of it, I met Jared Isaacman, and the pandemic was raging. We were in full bodysuits when we met. And Jared is one of the youngest. He is the youngest self-made billionaire in America. He, when I met him, was he's the founder of Shift 4 Payments, and we were meeting because Jared wanted Known to be the agency for his global payments processing company, Shift 4. And honestly, that sounds about as boring as it is. Like, it's a global payments processing company. And here I am taking the meeting because nobody else wanted to go because it's the pandemic. And I'm in person with a billionaire who's way younger than me and his team. And everyone's wearing full bodysuits in this office of a company they had just acquired in Jersey City. And so here we are. And I'm like, this is really going to be a boring meeting. And it was a fine meeting, and like we won the business in the room, and that was cool. And I understood the challenge. I was excited by it. And he said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes? I just want to talk to you one on one." I'm like, "Sure." And he said, "So everyone left." And he said, "So do you know anything about SpaceX?" I said, "Well, I mean, what everyone knows about space. Do you know anything about Elon?" I said, "Not really." This is 5 years ago, and 4 years ago. And he said, "Well, I just purchased the first four tickets on the first all the only four tickets seats on the first all civilian mission to outer space." And I'm like, "What in God's name is he talking about?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, there's no astronauts. Like it's just four regular people, and we get to go up on the Dragon, rocket."
Bet you didn't expect to hear that day.
No, and so he starts telling me about it. He's really excited. And first of all, I'm like, I don't believe this is even what. Now I'm like, is his other business we just did a deal on? Is that even real, or is he making that up too? And so yeah, and so he starts telling me more and more detail, and I'm like, is he inviting me to be one of the passengers on the rocket ship? That's what I thought we were talking about. That he had seen something in my background, and he was like, I think you'd be a good addition to the crew. And I'm like, is he about to ask me to go? So I was like, Jared, before you ask, I don't know if I would ever really want to go. And then he's like, dude, I'm not asking you to go on this rocket ship with me. He said, you're not going on the rocket ship. And I'm like, oh,
Thank God.
yeah. I was like, I don't, he's like, why would I invite you on the rocket? I'm like, right, you're right. Good point. I think I made an error there. And he's like, no, I want you to help me craft this mission. Like, I want this mission to have meaning and purpose. And I want people to know about it and care about it. And I want people to see my intentions. And I think that if we do this right, not only will we usher in or kick open the door to a new era of space exploration, but also we can solve some of the problems here on Earth while we do it. And I'm like, whoa. And that was the beginning of the Inspiration 4 mission, which we worked on together and known as an agency. And Jared and his team worked collaboratively with a lot of people and with SpaceX directly to conceive a mission that could do exactly that, that would take four people who are not astronauts, who are regular people like you and me, Steve, and train them and take them up to dance among the stars and move science and humanity forward, but also try and do some good here on planet Earth while they were up there. And while they were up there, we raised $250 million for another client of ours, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee.
What an extraordinary opportunity. And also just like what a beautiful way to put all those things together, all those disparate parts. So your background in poetry and music is pretty obvious to me, at least. Like to be able to have the idea, like to be able to hear it, take that in, and then start putting these parts together is the kind of inspiration that musicians get, I think, or poets get.
I think that's right. And I think you as a musician, as a guitarist, this, you sort of have to divide your limbs. You've got like your right hand doing what your right hand's doing and your left hand's doing something totally different, but somehow they're communicating on another level. And that's what it felt like, but with like a gazillion limbs. And we brought in an incredible director, Jason Heyer, who did The Last Dance. We brought in Time Studios and Time Magazine. They were on the cover of Time Magazine. And ultimately, in a bidding war, Netflix won the series. And we made that series in real time. The first time Netflix had ever done a real time documentary series where it's literally happening hundreds of miles outside, out of Earth in the orbit, while we're editing what's actually happening almost in real time and trying to get it up on television on Netflix quickly.
It's amazing work because it's original. And when you think about, like, I love what you said about being able to separate your limbs, because the balls you have to juggle for that thing to happen. Because, you've got your limb that's going like, how much money are we spending? What's the budget? You've got your limb of like, okay, who am I featuring? And then you somehow bring in St. Jude's and make it this incredible philanthropic thing too.
I think you're only limited by your own imagination because we're sitting here with all of the tools, the talent, and the technology at our fingertips. So what are you going to do, right, with that one moment you got? And that's the pressure that I feel, which is I'm not competing with other agencies, or I'm competing with my own ability to imagine something and then manifest it. And Known Originals is a very exciting place where that plays out. We've announced two other projects. There are about 10 others coming, but the two next projects, one of them's almost done, which is our documentary about the McDonald's All-American basketball game, which is now going into its 48th year. And you can't name an NBA global superstar that didn't play in this one game when he or she were 17 years old in high school, right? So the greatest basketball players in history, starting with Magic Johnson, all played in this one game with McDonald's when they were a senior in high school. So we're making that right now with for Amazon Prime. So it'll be out next year, and it's a great example of how to tell a brand story, McDonald's, in a very authentic and compelling way in culture that is definitely going to break through and be super meaningful to generations, not just of basketball fans, but of anybody who believes that like watching a kid with a dream bring that dream to life on a big stage is something to care about and be inspired by. That's that story. And the other one is for a long time client of ours, Universal Music Group, which is the largest music company in the world, has an archive, which is also the largest music archive in the history of mankind. And they've granted us exclusive access to tell, for the first time, to go down deep into Iron Mountain, which is so deep in planet Earth that you can't blow it up with a nuclear bomb. It's super protected, it's super secure, and we're going down there every week and coming out with stories, music, film, video, photographs that no one's ever seen before from some of the biggest artists that we all love. And so I'm really excited because these are. It's not. I wouldn't call any of this branded content. I think of it as brand inspired content, and that's what we're trying to do: is tell stories in all of the channels and mediums that we now have at our disposal.
I love that term, brand inspired content. By the way, both those projects sound absolutely amazing. And the music archive one, I'm showing up for both of those.
I gotta bring you. I gotta bring you to the premiere of that one.
Oh my God, dude, I'm there. Like that's so exciting. Both of those stories are amazing. And it's brand inspired content, but it's inspiring brand content too. I mean, this kind of comes back to how much do you care about your audience and how much you're going to show up for them. So like you can sell them something, sure. And sometimes selling them something is doing them a favor if you have something good to sell. But how do you ignite their passion? How do you tell them a story that makes them feel something? Because we all are loyal to brands and buy things because of our emotions, not because of our logic centers. Like, so this is inspiring content that's going to make you feel differently about Universal Music or make you feel differently about McDonald's.
So when we do anything out in the world, anything on any platform, no matter how big or small, what we are trying to do is learn, not just win, learn, right? Understand what worked and what didn't, with whom and why, and what's the next set of questions or hypotheses that we want to go answer or test. Those kinds of learning agendas where you think about day one of a campaign as the moment when you know the least and you have the ability to persistently optimize in sync with a learning agenda. That's about applying the scientific method to creativity. And that's, I think, when I think about the ongoing conversations on your podcast, that's to me where we're going, which is like a world where it's not about robots doing things for us. It's about, as human beings and creative leaders, how can we tell stories for brands that live in the world in a way that they can listen, learn, and get better and more compelling, not just sit out there and keep getting shot at me as you target me, right?
I think that's the key to the future of this industry. And I think in a lot of ways, you all are blazing a trail for it with what you're doing. Because, when you were talking about that, I kept thinking about something that brands and the agencies that work for them tend to be really bad at is listening. Like they say they're listening and they're listening for metrics, right? They're listening for outcomes that are what they want, but they're not listening for what's next. They're not listening to like your bread analogy, right? The customer shows up, and they really like that hot bread. Well, you're not listening. You're not looking at your metrics of how much bread you sold. You're listening like these people really love this. What else could I bring to them that they might love as well?
The thing I would really point to though is that it's not like we're the only agency that figured this out. I think most marketers, most agencies know this. The problem is that their business models inhibit them from doing anything about it or prohibit them from doing anything about it, right? So you have relationships that are fraught because of perverse incentives, and it's really hard to affect change inside your company when sort of like locked into a model that was created 30 or 40 years ago. And we don't have that problem here. We've got our own set of challenges as an independent agency, but that's not one of them, right? And so when you're unencumbered by those factors, you're free to do what I know clients would expect, which is align your business objectives with the business objectives of your clients and eliminate all perverse incentives. So in the case of known, we don't win if our clients don't win, right? In the case of known, I don't want you to spend more money next year on your marketing than you did last year. I would far prefer you spend less and beat last year's numbers across the board. And I want to be rewarded for that, not for convincing you and your CFO and your board to spend more money, but by being smarter, more sophisticated, more predictive, and more precise in how you allocate your dollars and resources so that you can actually beat last year, but do it more efficiently than you did the year before.
Yeah, and then you get better relationships between clients and agencies, and it's not so transactional.
It's why our clients stick with us, right? It's why we're growing. It's why we're growing so fast. It's why when a CMO leaves one job and goes to the next, we get that call, which is, hey, like, you got to come with me. And as soon as you get there, tell me what I need to know and see about this new brand. This is what you and I talked about in the beginning of the conversation, which is all the wastes and inefficiency that a new CMO inherits when they get to a new job, right? And they go, there's almost this thing that we call it FOFO, which is fear of finding out. The FOFO is like, wow, like how much money are we wasting here in upper or lower funnel spend? And I'm telling you, we've found about $250 million in waste in the last 10 to 12 months for new clients. And you're like, think about how awesome that is though, right? If you're a CMO or a CFO and you get the media opportunity analysis back from known after 10 weeks. And by the way, we've guaranteed you a 5x return on whatever fee you're paying us to do that analysis because we know we're going to find probably 10 to 20x what you're paying us. But so here you go, and we just found $25 million of upper funnel waste, and you're shocked. You immediately put your media agency in review because you've been ripped off for years, and you realize, wow, I have greater optionality than I did yesterday. I can spend those dollars in the ways that I know will be more impactful for my business. And that is a really empowering, liberating feeling for a chief marketing officer. And that's why that hero product of ours keeps getting bought.
Oh, I'm sure. And then also it's the intention behind it too. I mean, that's how you should be compensated. And we have clients, the average client life in our industry, 1 to 2 years. That's insane. Like what business are you even in if you can't hold on to a client longer than a year or two? Like that's not sustainable. Because relationships and the stories we tell each other and who we recommend each other to are the lifeblood of any successful business. And, the saving your client money, not just if you have an incentive to sell them more media because that's your model and all you're going to do is sell them more media because you have to make more money. You've set up a situation where you're not going to behave in a way that's sustainable or really very honest, So I love the companies that are looking at it differently and trying to just bring the value they can. When you wake up and you're going to live your clients' brands with them, it's a very different paradigm than the old one.
Amen.
And, it's just, I admire what you're doing, man, and I'm there for it. Your career has been absolutely amazing, and I know you're nowhere near done. But what do you want your legacy to be? Because, man, you've accomplished some really cool things. And, the next 5 or 10 years in our space is going to be challenging and with lots of change and lots of the media landscaping has changed. Where are you going and what do you want your legacy to be when all this is done?
Thank you for the question. I have the honor in a year of being the chair of the Advertising Hall of Fame for its 75th anniversary, and I'll get to induct 7 legends that I look up to. I don't know who they will be, but they'll be icons into the Hall of Fame for advertising. And when I stand on that stage, I'm going to be proud to serve. And that's because I think the people we will induct will be people who have made our industry better in lots of different kinds of ways, right? So I think I'm at the point in my career, I guess, sort of. I mean, I would prefer to think I'm only halfway through, but where I'm moving from the idea of just making better marketing to making marketing better, and I feel that now in a way that I think I didn't feel really a few years ago. To me, it's like less about creating a legacy and more about like, how consequential can your life work be, right? And how much good can you do um, while you're here? And so I'm deeply engaged in that and deeply committed to it. And I don't just want to make better marketing. I will also want to make marketing better. And the way I think that we can do that is by evolving the systems themselves, right? Which were mostly built a really long time ago. And I'm good at breaking stuff. And so I am breaking a bunch of systems down with other people and making them more fair and equitable, more diverse, more creative, more inspiring. And I really am committed to that. And then I also feel like, the greatest joy for me um, is like looking at someone that has worked with me or for me, especially someone that I bet on, and I've bet on hundreds of people in my career, do awesome shit. You know what I mean?
No better feeling.
You're like, yeah, and like do it in a good way, right? Where they're great people doing great work and you can cheer them on. I used to think when I was younger, I just want to get to the top. I just want to get to the top. It's like, what was I even thinking? There's no top. I climbed my way all the way to the middle, right? Congratulations, good you got there. But I realized that I was thinking about things in exactly the wrong way, right? And I used to think like there's only room for a few of the best marketers on the planet. Not at all. Like I view it inverted, right? So that I feel like I'm down here and I'm trying to create sort of, I guess, like a diaspora of people that I have maybe taught something to or inspired in some way who can do far better work than I ever could have. And I'm watching it actually come true. I'm watching this happen every day now. And I feel like excited to cheer that on and celebrate it because these are real human beings doing really powerful, inspiring work. That's not just moving our industry forward, it's just surprising and delighting people all over the world. And watching that actually come to be, it's like that's what I want my kids to look at and go like, yeah, my dad didn't do that. My dad inspired the person who did that. Like that's better to me.
Yeah. But dude, it's like, the legacy question is always tricky, right? Because you're at a point in your life that I don't think you'd be looking at it the way you are right now if you hadn't gotten there through all the things that you've experienced, obviously. Right. But right now, with all my favorite guests I've on this podcast, they share one quality that I think you have in spades, and it's an abundance mindset. You're showing up with this abundance mindset of improving things, making marketing better. That helps so many of us in marketing. And it helps on the client side, it helps people be more successful. And then encouraging others and growing them. It is really interesting how at the beginning of a career, a lot of times it's all about you, right? And trying to get to where you want to go. And now you're at the part where it's like about us.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. So years ago, I did something for Pepsi, brand Pepsi. And we basically decided it was one of the best pitches in my life. So maybe on another episode, I'll tell you about the pitch itself, which was just super fun. But the campaign was the idea was that like halftime, of the Super Bowl is not just something that happens for 12 and a half minutes one Sunday a year. Halftime is a state of mind. And if there's a beginning of something and there's an end of something, then there has to be a middle, and we should be able to celebrate right in the middle, right? So in the pitch itself, I called halftime in the middle of the pitch and brought in a marching band to Pepsi's headquarters to celebrate halftime of the pitch itself, which is such a meta. Wait, what? Like, why are we celebrating in the middle of your pitch? It's halftime. And so we decided to declare halftime in the middle of like things that you wouldn't expect there would be a halftime of. So a week before the Super Bowl was the Grammy Awards. And we were like, well, why is it that like the biggest music artists on the planet perform at the halftime show of the biggest sporting event on the planet? Why don't we have the best athletes perform at the biggest music moment of the year? So we had a halftime show with Mike Ditka and Deion Sanders and Matthew Stafford and Terry Bradshaw performing on stage in a commercial break at the Pepsi halftime show in the middle of the Grammys. And we were trying to win the Super Bowl the week before for Pepsi. And it was awesome. It was awesome. And it was directed by Mick G. He's a great director, super fun. And you watch this happen on live TV. You put in all this work for months, and then it's time for it to air. And you're like, I hope people think it's smart and good. Like, I don't know what to do now. It's out of my hands, right? And you just sit back and watch. You just watch social media either like destroy you or say nice things, right?
Showtime.
And the first tweet that I saw was from a senior executive, not at Pepsi, but at Coca-Cola, Jonathan Mildenhall from 21st Century Brand now, and who, famously is now at Rocket Industries and one of the great CMOs of our time, and not someone that I'm socially friends with. I didn't know him. And he goes on Twitter and he's like, this is an amazing campaign by PepsiCo. I love this. It's brilliant. And that dude could have gotten fired at Coca-Cola for that. You don't do that when you're at Coca-Cola. You're not complimenting a campaign from PepsiCo. It was the greatest compliment I had ever gotten. And it wasn't even about me. He didn't know me. He just liked the work. And so I saw that and I'm like, it taught me a lesson. Jonathan Milton Hall, who I don't know well, taught me a lesson, which is it's more than okay to point at work you didn't do that might be directly competitive to what you're trying to achieve and appreciate the F out of it. And go like, that's good shit. I like that. And that's okay. And so I've taken that with me. And that's what I think you mean by like an abundance mindset, right? That like, I'm going to have a way better idea tomorrow than I did today. I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to be like, thank God I get to go do what I do at noon. Like I have another day, one more day, and I'd love another day after it. And what could I do with that? And in the process, like, how can I inspire others along the way? That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, it comes through, man. You're a blast to talk with, and your work is just insanely great. I mean, I love everything you're doing, and I would love to have you back anytime you want to come on the podcast. Just hit me up, and we're there. We can talk about whatever we feel like talking about, because this has been an absolute blast for me. Let me just hit you with a couple of closing questions, because I figure you probably have a few things you'd like to get to this afternoon, so I won't keep you all day. This is a question I thought about asking you this because Kristen Cavallo and I spent a bunch of time talking about this. How has fear impacted you either positively or negatively in your career? Because you're taking some big risks and doing some big new things.
So I can't stand when people say that they're fearless or compliment someone else for being fearless. Fear is a really important human experience. In fact, it protects you, from sometimes like catastrophe. For me, it motivates me. I wish it didn't. I wish I didn't have a lot of fear, but I do have a lot of fear, and I fear failure all the time, and I fail all the time. I was having a conversation with David Droga just a week and a half ago. I deeply admire the man and what he's been able to achieve in our industry. And we were talking about failure and how many times we've lost and how personally we take it. And you wouldn't think David freaking Droga is going to take a loss personally at this point in his career. I do, and he does. We do, and I use my fear and my failure as fuel. For me, I am built with a catalytic converter, and I take that stuff and I use it as energy and it's painful, and I don't like the feeling. But as soon as something feels shitty to me and we lose something, I immediately turn to planting more seeds and creating whatever I can create, because I just can't sit in the loss and the failure and the fear. I can't sit in it. I have to do something with it. Otherwise, I'm just going to go down and never come back. So that's me, and it goes back to poetry days. But when you're a poet and you're trying to get published in literary journals, you wait 6 months, 8 months, and you get a quarter of a sheet of paper rejecting you because they didn't want to waste the whole page, right? And they're like, no simultaneous submission. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to take the rejection letter and I'm going to send out these poems to 10 more journals tomorrow, because it's the only way I can like cope with and that the failure I feel, right, and the fear of being rejected. So like I'm gonna go. I'm going to go plant more seeds immediately as soon as I possibly can and try to harvest them. And the last thing I'll say, and Carl Jung said this, like fear and anxiety, are you rehearsing for failure and tragedy? I don't want to rehearse for fear, for tragedy at all. I just want to move past that, so I just go through it.
Man, I love that. And I think all really successful people deal with fear or are motivated by fear or have it play a role in their lives in different ways. So that's the same way I feel if someone says they're fearless. I'm like, well, I'm going to let you get away with it today. But really, are any of us fearless? Sometimes we borrow a lot of fear from the future we don't need. Beyond that,
You're nailing it. That, borrowing a lot of fear from the future that we don't need. That's brilliant. I'm going to quote you on. I'm going to make a T-shirt.
it's like wait till it gets here, then be afraid. Let's not borrow fear we don't have already. You know, I think that's craziness. So, two more questions. I'll let you go. What would you name this chapter of your life right now?
Adventure.
Adventure?
Yeah.
You seem like you're having a blast, man.
I am. I am. I feel like it's the Wild West out here. Like so many, and we work in about 16 different business industries. Like more than half of them are upside down and have no idea what's going to happen a month from now. And I look at that and I go like, all right, to your point on fear, yeah, there's a lot of fear. There's also a great amount of opportunity. And to me, if you can embrace that, you know, Charlie Chaplin said that up close, life is tragedy, but from far away, it's a comedy. So I'm trying to back up a little bit. I'm trying to back up a little bit and look at it, Steve, and be like, wow, this is some crazy, chaotic time that we're living in right now for all kinds of reasons. And you know what? Like, if you step back far enough, you can almost laugh at how absurd this is. And I look at it and go, like, okay, I'm on some kind of an adventure, and I'm blessed with to do it with people I love and who I believe in, who work with me, and who are way more brilliant than I am. So here we go. Let's just get up tomorrow and get on the ride and do it again.
Yeah, and I think that perspective, when you can get back and look at it with a little comedy and a little bit of joy, changes the outcome.
Joy is everything, right? If you're like, there was a time last year and a half ago, where and it's true for a lot of agencies today. This got harder for everybody over the last couple of years, way more complex, and it stopped being fun. And we realized, we looked at each other here at No, and we're like, damn, man, like we're working too hard to have no fun. There's no joy. And we said, no more, no more. We actually have to remember to find joy in what we do every day, and how blessed we are to get to do it.
I think that's the whole ball game right there, because that energy brings better things to you.
And better people.
Yeah. And yeah, if you exist in that other space, it's going to start spiraling downward. Okay, last question. I'll let you go. What advice would you give your younger self now that you're here? Remember that guy back then? What would you tell him?
I know it's simple and probably other people say it, but I would say, Ross, it's going to be okay. It's going to be more than okay. It's going to be way more than okay. No matter what, it's going to be way more than okay. And I still tell myself that, no matter no matter sort of what you're able to achieve in your career, you still got to wake up the next morning, like take on the world. I live in New York City. It's not an easy place to be. And the more you do, like sometimes the harder it seems like things get. Not easier. Definitely more complex, not simpler. But there's a faith in yourself and in the world around you that if you can find it in the course of your day, it doesn't just bring you peace, but it brings you joy. And I'm after that just like everybody else every day. And I have to tell myself what I would have told myself 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like, it's going to be better than okay.
Man, that's a beautiful thing to end on. I got to tell you, I think if everyone would repeat that to themselves a little bit more, we'd all feel a little bit better every day because it is going to be okay, man. Like,
Thank you. I appreciate you.
yeah. So, hey, thank you so much for today. This was beautiful. I had an incredible time talking with you.
Me too.
So, thank you for being here.
Thank you. And thanks so much for your podcast. I love it. And I hope you do this forever because I'm a big fan.
Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.